Hi, I'm Jenny of Sincerely Jen Patterns. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making the Harmonica Hobo Bag. This is a slouchy hobo bag that has a shoulder strap and crossbody strap. The exterior has a zipper pocket on the front. The lining has an interior zipper pocket with a vinyl overlay and a split slip pocket on the other side. The harmonica does have a rectangle bottom, so that's much easier to sew. I know a lot of people don't like oval bottoms, even though they're my favorite. If you don't already follow my channel, go ahead and give me a follow and make sure you let me know what you think about this video and give it a thumbs up if you like what you see. Thanks for watching. All right, so let's get started sewing. We are going to take two mirrored exterior main panels, place them right sides together, matching all of the edges. And then we're going to clip together along this short straight edge only. All right, this pattern uses a 3/8 inch seam allowance unless otherwise noted. So we're going to sew this together using that 3/8 inch seam allowance. I like to do most of my sewing with like a stitch length of 3 to 4, depending. With vinyl, I'll use a little bit longer stitch length, so I have it set to 4 right now. Sometimes I don't even change it, honestly, between sewing and top stitching. The thread I'm using is a Mon Tech 70, and it's kind of a grayish purple color. All right, we want to fold these away from each other and press the seam open. And then we're going to top stitch along each side of the seam using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So just as I sew, I'm going to make sure that the seam allowance stays pressed open. You can use double-sided tape if you wanted to hold the seam allowance open, but I don't like to use like a ton of extra tape where it's not necessary, and I don't feel that it is necessary here. Okay, so we sewed down one side, and now we'll sew down the other side. Now, I think it was the Regina Phalange pattern, or the video, that my head was like in a whole lot of the video. So I'm really going to try hard not to have a repeat of that. All right, now we want to repeat this using the other two exterior main panels. Place these right sides together. How many clips when you're sewing? How many of your clips end up on the floor? So I think a lot of mine end up there. All right, now we'll press this seam open and do the same thing, top stitch down each side. All right, so now we have both of those together. We're going to take one of these. I'm going to put the other one aside for now. And we are going to use the exterior pocket A pattern piece. And I want to line up with the center seam. Oops, and the bottom. It should line up even at the bottom and along the center seam. So just like that. And this part here should line up with the top. And we're going to trace this little cutout area, flip it over, line it up the same way, and trace the other side. And then we're actually going to cut this out. Just directly along the lines. Okay. Now we're going to take exterior pocket A, which is where the cutout is, and we're going to line these up, matching those cutout areas together. And we want these right sides together. All right, and then we're going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance again and sew along this cutout area only. You can also measure and mark the 3/8 inch seam allowance if you want. So you would just take your ruler. It can be helpful kind of at the end so that you know where to stop sewing. So for example, oops, let me do it this way. 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so that way when I'm sewing down, I know where to stop and pivot. And you can do that for all of these. And if you have I might have used the wrong line. No, I didn't. If you have these 1 inch wide rulers from Mormino, they have a 3/8 inch line on them, which I guess most 1 inch rulers probably do. I don't know. I only have Mormino 1 inch rulers. Okay, but anyway, so you can mark that out if you want. It can make it easier to sew. So now I'm just going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around this cutout portion. Make sure that you back stitch well at the start and stop. And then when you get to a corner, you want to stop with your needle in the down position to pivot. So sometimes I like to get it just right. I'll lift up my presser foot so that I can see, and then just kind of slide the fabric so that the needle can go down right in the exact spot that I want it. All right, now we're going to clip into each of these corners, being careful not to clip through the stitching. All right, now this is a place where I'm going to use double-sided tape, if I can find it. All right, I have like several partial beaten up rolls, so we're going to use up some of these. So I'm just going to start here, and I'm going to place a line of this all the way down the cut edge of that piece, and then also on the other side. If you're using something that can be ironed, obviously you could iron this flat. You don't have to use tape. You could just flip it and use clips. I just find that I get a better result when I do use tape. But I also use tape for like everything. So. All right, so I'm just going to fold that down like so. Repeat with each of the short sides. Do the same thing on this side. I really hate when the paper shreds like that. And I think, I don't remember if it was Rhea who did it, but if you kind of like scrape your fingernail on the paper backing that it like helps it to come loose. Okay, so once I have this all taped like that, I'm going to flip this so that it's wrong sides together. And if you need to unstick some of the pieces to fix them, not a big deal. Maybe it's really better to stick them after you flip it. The top of this should be lined up, the top of the pocket panel should be lined up with the top of the exterior panel. I am making this so much harder than it needs to be. So yeah, I would actually suggest using the tape, and then I swear I stuck it down last time before I flipped it and it worked out great, but it's like all puffy. So I'm actually going to unstick it all and restick it. So stick it down after you flip it, but the tape does help. I promise. All right, that looks beautiful. Okay, so now we are going to take the 10-inch zipper which should have a zipper pull on it. I did not attach my zipper pulls yet. So to do that, you just separate. I like to look at which side has the tooth in the higher position, which is this side. Separate the zipper tape a little bit, and then I look inside the end of the zipper pull to make sure that the teeth are aligned the same way they were before I separated it. All right, and then just like that, it's reattached. Let me make sure this is 10 inches. Yep. Okay, so I want to, on the wrong side of this, use a little more tape. I'm just going to go along the straight edges of the cutout area. Okay, we want to make sure that the zipper is centered, and we want the zipper pull to be closing to the left. The top of the zipper should line up with the top of the pocket panel and the top of the exterior panel. And you want to make sure that it looks straight along the bottom of the cutout area. All right, so just like that. And if you take a ruler, the part of the zipper exposed should measure 7/8 of an inch. And that is important that that's correct. So I'm just going to move my clips so that they're also holding that zipper down. And then we're going to top stitch around this cutout area only using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, if you have a hump jumper, it can be helpful to use that when you sew up over the zipper areas. All right, so now we have this part sewn. And now we want to flip this over. And on the back, we want to take the exterior pocket B and place it right side down over exterior pocket A. And we want to match up all of the edges. Okay, and we're going to sew first along the sides only. Oh, I broke a clip. Every now and then you have a casualty. Okay, so we're going to sew the sides together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and up at the top you're going to sew through the end of the zipper tape. All right, and then we want to line the bottom of the pocket up with the bottom of the exterior, and then we're just going to baste that in place using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now flip this right side up, we're going to take one of the exterior top panels and place it right side down on top of this, matching up the long bottom edge of the exterior top panel to the top edge of the exterior mains and the zipper. This part will probably be easier to sew with a zipper foot on, to make sure that you can maintain the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance along the top of the zipper. So I'm going to go ahead and also attach the top panel to my other exterior mains now, and then I'll sew those together while I sewed my regular foot on before I switch over to the zipper foot. All right, and then we're going to top stitch this with the seam allowance pressed up toward the top panel, using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, so we have this. Now I'm going to stitch out to my zipper foot. Oh, that's the wrong screw. All right, and we'll top stitch, or we'll sew this together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And when you get to the zipper, you'll want to make sure that you move the zipper pull out of the way. Just take it nice and slow and really try to maintain that 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now I can switch back to my other foot. So the foot that I usually use is I think it's just called a narrow foot. I got mine from Mormino, which I don't think she sells them anymore, but I think you can buy them from Sunny Sewing. So again, we want to press the seam allowance up toward the top panel. And we're going to top stitch this using a stitch length of 5 with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And I just continuously pull the panels away from each other as I top stitch. All right, we now want to put these two exterior panels right sides together and match up one of the sides. You want to make sure that the seams where we attach the top panels are lined up really well. And go ahead and clip together only along the one side right now. Okay, now once again, 3/8 inch seam allowance. Be careful as you sew over that seam to make sure that it stays lined up. And this is another instance where a hump jumper can be helpful because it is a little bit thick there. I bought this hump jumper from someone on Etsy. I don't remember the seller's name, but it's like a 3D printed file with like a hinge, so it can be really thick. It can be like a medium thickness or a thinner thickness. So I really like it. And I do think there are other people that sell them now. I've had that one for several years. Okay, now I'm going to press this seam allowance open and top stitch down both sides. It's a little trickier where the top panels are because that seam is a little bit thick. Just take your time. Taking your time is the most important. This is not a race. And this top stitching is not really for visual purposes because we are going to be sewing the strap connectors right over top of it. It's more for the purpose of keeping the seam allowance open, which will definitely help when attaching those handle connectors. So if it's not completely straight, it's not the end of the world. Okay, we're going to set this aside to prepare our strap handle connectors. Strap connectors? We'll go with strap connectors. Okay, so on the wrong side of each of the 4 connectors, measure 1 inch in from along side and draw a line down the center. If you wanted to, you could cut this as one long piece and get it ready and then cut it into 4. That didn't work out. All right, so now I like to use my 1/2 inch double-sided tape on my connectors. So I'm going to place that directly down the center on the wrong side of each of the handle strap connectors. All right, and then we'll press each of the long raw edges in to that center line. And you don't have to use double-sided tape if you don't like it. We're going to do this with all 4. All right, now we're going to top stitch down the centers of these connectors. So we're going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance along each side. So there's going to be like a row of stitching down the center of the connectors. And then when we stitch them onto the bag, we'll be using a 1/8 inch seam allowance that will go down the sides. And you can do like what I'm doing here where I'm kind of chain stitching these together, and then we'll just snip the threads to trim them apart. Okay, now we're going to mark on the back of 2 of these, 2.5 inches down from one edge, well, the top edge. And that is because we want to fold the top 1.25 inch to the back. So if we mark double that, then if we just fold it down to that line, that will be the correct amount. All right, now I do say D-rings in the instructions. Triangle rings will also work. So right here, we're going to place a rectangle ring on each of those and fold the top down to the marked line. And this is just decorative. It's really the only purpose for this part. All right, and then the top one, we're going to mark 4.25 inches because we want to fold them to the center. We want to fold them in half. All right, so one side will slide onto the rectangle rings that are attached to the bottom. Just like this, and to that marked line. And then put your triangle ring or D-ring on the top and fold that down. So now you have this. All right, so we have our two connectors. So I'm going to set one of them aside. I'm going to take my bag exterior and some more of my tape. All right, first I'm going to peel off bottom, and I'm just going to line this up centered over that seam. Sorry for my head. Kind of stick it down, and then I will do the same with the top portion of the connector. Make sure that it's centered, which that stitching really helps. Okay, now for this part, my rectangle rings are from Mormino. So the size of this with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, the top of that is plenty far enough away, 1 inch. You want the top folded portion of this to be 1 inch from the top. So if you need to scoot the bottom of this off of here a little bit, that's fine, and then you'll just trim it off later. Make sure this is 1 inch down from the top. Yes, that'll be perfect. All right, and then we're going to sew using a 1/8 inch seam allowance around the bottom portion of the connector, and then around the top portion. All right, now my top part came kind of unstuck while I was sewing that, so I'm just going to make Make sure that it's still centered. And then we're going to do the same thing to sew around it using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, when you get to the top underneath the D-ring or triangle ring, you'll want to sew across and then back stitch across and then go back across. And I try to make sure that I'm sewing in the same holes as much as possible so that I'm not like perforating the vinyl a lot. And then when I get back down to where I started, I did not backstitch that, and I should have. So I'm going to make sure I stop right there in the same hole where I started. I'm going to stitch over it again, and then I'm going to backstitch, and then I'll actually pull the threads to the back and tie them off too. Ooh. Does your foot ever just get heavy and like hit the pedal when you don't mean to? Because that's what just happened to me. All right, obviously, if you're using a domestic sewing machine, you might want to make sure that you're using a thinner vinyl. You still want it to be drapey, or you can use a woven fabric. That might be easier for your machine to handle. Always important to pick out materials that work with your sewing machine. All right, so that's what we have right now for one of the connectors. So now we're going to repeat. If you want rivets on this, I'm not going to add any. You can put them here, 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 here. So it really adds like a decorative element, but it's not necessary. So totally optional. Now we'll line up the other side the same way. So first I'm matching up that seam and then clip together all the way along the side. So the second side, the connector is a little bit more difficult to attach because this is going to be like already, you know, a round shape. As I come up to the seam, I'm going to use my hump jumper again to just help me get across that easier. All right, now we're going to press that seam open again and top stitch along both sides of it using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. right, and while I do this, I kind of put one of my hands underneath the vinyl or underneath the seam to press like the next little section of it open. All right, and see how I just kind of move the opening along the top down out of my way so that I can see what I'm doing, and not sewing through that side of it. And this is actually much easier on this bag than some others because the vinyl is slouchy. All right, and then we're just going to kind of turn this now because I'm going to top stitch down the other side also using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to leave the bag in there how it is and then just readjust as I sew down this way. All right, so now that seam is all sewn, we're going to take the other prepared strap connector and use the same method, double-sided tape down the center. I'm just going to leave the paper on the top part for now, since it did kind of come up while I was sewing the bottom part, so that way I don't have to worry about it like sticking to something else. All right, and this is a little bit trickier to attach this side because you can't completely see what you're doing. So get that centered as good as possible. And then use that top stitching to your advantage to line it up. Make sure it's nice and straight. And if you need to, you can pull it up and adjust. Okay. So then we're going to top stitch around the bottom portion of the connector using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now we'll line up the top part of the connector. Press that down into place and sew around it using a 1/8 inch seam allowance as well. All right, here I just backstitched a couple stitches on the side portion, and I'm still just going to pull these threads to the back and tie them off. If I can. Doesn't look like I can on the bottom so easily because I did backstitch really well there, so I'm just going to trim the front part off. And I'll tie together these 3 strings that I do have in the back. Okay, it's much easier to tie them if they're all the same length. And you can use a lighter to singe the ends of your knot. Make sure that they don't come untied. Kind of melts it together. Okay. So now we have this complete tube of a bag with connectors attached. Wait, we want to mark the center first on the bottom panel. That will make it easier to line up the next part. So 4 1/4 inches. That is not right. Don't listen to me. All right, it's 9 1/2 inches long. So 4 1/2, 4 3/4. That would be the center. Not this. It's this one. Okay. Now, let's shove this back in here. Match it up to one of these little protruding side parts. And we'll just clip that together. If the bottom panel does not fit right, that would mean your seam allowances were not exactly at 3/8 of an inch. So I would suggest that you just kind of center it and roll with it. It should match up correctly if everything was sewn together correctly. All right, I'm sewing this together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now seam allowance toward the bottom panel, and then we're going to top stitch through the bottom panel and the seam allowance using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now let's repeat and attach the bottom panel to the other side using the same process. Three-eighths inch seam allowance. All right, and then top stitch using a 1/8 inch seam allowance, which the second side's a little bit trickier. A little seam guide tape's all peeling off here on my bag. All right, now we will fold the bottom corners like this. This is the exterior and the exterior are right sides together in that corner. It's not folding at that seam, okay? So the center of the bottom panel will be matched up with the center seam on the exterior mains. I don't remember, I think it's easier to sew it with the bottom panel facing up. So first, clip these all together. I'm going to do both sides at one time, or clip them all together at once anyway. All right, and then we're going to sew along each side using a 3/8 inch seam allowance and my shorter stitch length. You want to make sure to back stitch well at the start and stop here. And you should not be sewing through that Decoville heavy on the bottom, but just kind of next to it. Truly about 1/8 of an inch away. All right. Once that is sewn, you will want to trim this seam allowance down kind of like in half, I guess. And it will just help the bottom seam to lay a little bit nicer when you turn the bag right side out. All right, now we are going to set the exterior aside for now. If you want to take a look at it and see if it's beautiful. I'm excited. Okay. So now we're going to do the lining. So first we've got 2 interior slip pocket pieces. We're going to place these right sides together. I don't know how I want my stripes lined up. Doesn't really matter. I guess one's going to be on the inside and one on the outside. All right, we're only matching up the one side, and we're going to sew that together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And now we're going to turn this right side out. I'm going to try my seam roller on this. I have not used the waterproof canvas light yet from Mormino. I have a lot of it, but I haven't used it yet. Seems really nice. And I did iron the pieces quickly. I don't know if it shrinks. I would imagine it probably would if you held an iron on it for too long. I am horrible about like always ironing on hot. So like I don't ever turn the temperature of my iron down. So I iron them on like full hot temperature and just quickly, and it's fine. So use that information for whatever. But I do think it would probably melt if you held the iron on it for a long time or in one spot. Okay, so once that's turned right side out, we've got the into slip pocket contrast. So I'm going to mark the center of this first, which the strip is only 1 inch wide. So the 1/2 inch mark. And I cut this out of the contrast. You could use your exterior. You could use something different. I would use whatever you're using for your zipper overlay though. All right, I'm going to use this wider double-sided tape for this. I bought this from Mormino. She calls it Binding Buddy. I think it's 3/4 of an inch wide. All right, now we want to take this slip pocket. This is sticking to me. Okay, and we want to line it up with that line down the center of the slip pocket contrast piece. And then fold that over the top, just like this. All right, and then I'm also, because each side of this is attached to like one side of the slip pocket, it kind of puffs up weird. So I'm going to throw some clips on here. You could have also basted, I guess, the top of these pockets together. All right, now we want to top stitch this using a 1/8 inch seam allowance from the raw edge. Okay, now we want to take one of the lining main panels, place it right side up, place the, oh, also if you have tags like from the Sewing Blurb subscription, this is a great place to stick one, and I forgot, like normal. So we want to take a ruler and measure 1.5 inches up from the bottom straight edge, like this inner portion between the two little feet that come off. And we want to place this lined up with that. I'm going to take these clips off because they're in my way. I'm going to use some 1/8 inch tape along the bottom only of this pocket. If you have the Sew Tight magnetic sewing things, those are perfect for these kind of situations if you don't want to use tape. I don't have them. I should buy some, but I literally don't think of it unless I'm sitting here sewing. All right, so make sure this is centered. The bottom corner should match up with the sides of the lining panel. And then everything should be lined up along this 1.5 inch measurement. Okay, now we will use some clips on the sides where we can. All right, we're going to sew along the bottom edge first, using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, and then the sides will be easier to kind of baste in place from the wrong side because you want to sew matching the side. And I'm just using a 1/8 inch seam allowance again, and this is just kind of a basting stitch. And we'll repeat that on the other side. Okay, we can trim off the sides of the pocket to make it even with the side of the lining main. All right, now we need to find and mark the center. I don't know where I put my chalk pencil. All right, so this was 15.5 inches wide, I do believe. Yes. So half of that would be what? Anybody? 7 3/4. Probably shouldn't have cut that off just yet. But it's okay. If I didn't cut the sides off, I could measure the center a little easier. But we're just going to use the stripes to my advantage. Hopefully they're straight. That looks okay. I'm actually going to start at the bottom of this. And you want to backstitch really well, especially at the top. So I'm actually going to backstitch down quite a ways, and then pull my threads to the back, and I'm going to tie them off. Just to prevent them from coming undone. All right, and then with this Dritz pencil, it has an eraser on the back, so I can kind of get some of that pink chalk off. I stopped using the friction pens since the cold makes it come back. I do live in Ohio, and it is cold here in the winter, so I mean, I guess you could use a blow dryer iron to get it to go away again, but anyway. Okay, so this is the lining front now, and we can set this aside. All right, so now we want the other lining main and the zipper overlay. With the zipper overlay right side up, I am going to take double-sided tape along the outer edges only. All right, and I'm going to find the center of my lining main by folding it in half and pinching, so that stripe is pretty much centered. And then we want to measure 1.5 inches down from the top center. And then I'm going to peel the paper backing off of the tape. And make sure that the overlay is also centered. And then stick it down into place. The opening in the center should measure 1/2 inch wide. So if you need to unstick any portion of it and kind of straighten it out, you can do that now. All right, now we're going to top stitch around the edges of this using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. It doesn't really matter where you start. I like to definitely start along a straight edge though. And I don't back stitch. I pull the threads to the back on these and tie it off. I do want to put a tag here. Hold on. All right, we're going to go with this one from Sewing Blurbs, Time to Celebrate. And I guess what we're celebrating is that I'm finally going to have a new pattern. So I feel like that's cause for celebration. All right, when you get back to where you started, you kind of want to finish your line of stitching in the same hole that you started in. So lift up the presser foot and adjust as needed to get back to that same hole. Leave the threads long. I think my bobbin thread's almost gone. We're just going to pull the top threads to the back. And how I do that is I pull on the tails on the wrong side. And it pulls loops through of the top thread. All right, now we will cut the back of this out. So first, I like to do this from the right side, cut a hole in the center part. Now we're going to cut out about 1/4 of an inch away from the stitches. Be careful not to cut the overlay. We only want to cut away the lining fabric. So just take your time and be careful to not cut that overlay. And this doesn't have to be super neat. Nobody will see it. It's hidden between the layers. And half of that probably was not visible to you. So my apologies. I do think I'm going to do another video, maybe a live, because I have fabrics picked out for another one. All right, so in case you couldn't see that, I just hacked away, like literally a hack job, the fabric from the back of the zipper panel. So now when you look at it, you see right through. There's nothing behind the rectangle. Okay, so we're going to set that aside. We're going to take the two interior zipper pocket panels, and the 11-inch zipper. I'm going to attach my pole after. Okay, so you take your 11-inch zipper. You may have the zipper pole already attached to yours. Well, because I tell you to do that at the beginning. I'm going to attach my zipper pole after because it's just easier to sew on when there's no zipper pull on it. Okay, and this is all a little extra, but I feel like often I do this when I sew my zipper to my zipper panel or my zipper pocket panels, that it will end up being wavy. I do not want a wavy zipper. So what I have found that helps me a lot, first I iron my zipper tape. I don't iron over the teeth because a lot of the time they like seem to be sewn on with like fishing line. I don't know, like a clear plasticky type material. So I don't iron that because I think it will melt, but I just iron the tape part. So it helps if you start out with a nice straight, not wrinkly zipper tape. And then I use a lot of double-sided tape. And that's the only thing that I have found that really helps me to not have a wavy zipper. So it's worth it to me to use all the extra tape. So I'm top stitching or sewing this in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance right now. All right, and then on the back of this, I'm going to place another row of tape in that seam allowance area. Okay, and then we're going to flip the zipper up and use that tape to stick the seam allowance down on the wrong side of the interior zipper pocket panel. All right, so this is what we have, and then we're going to top stitch that in place using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. My zipper's wavy as fuck anyway. All right, now we'll place tape along the top of the zipper. All right, now we'll match this up to the top edge of the other interior zipper pocket panel. Okay, same thing, tape, tape, tape. Okay, I'm going to place some tape along the seam allowance area. Press the interior zipper pocket panel away from the zipper, just like that, and top stitch along this side, also using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay. Now I'm going to take my zipper pull and separate the teeth at one end and slide it on. Make sure that the teeth line up the same way that they did before you unzip it. Zipper pull down to one end, just like so. And then we're going to take the zipper overlay portion and place a line of double-sided tape along each side of the rectangle opening. All right, now you want to make sure the zipper pull is closing to the left and the zipper is centered from left to right as well as top to bottom in the opening. And then just stick that down into place. All right, now I like to start sewing along the top of the opening somewhere because I'm going to tie my threads off. And I like it to be like on the top so that knot is not along the bottom part of the zipper where you'll be putting your hand into the zipper. And now we're just going to sew all the way around this rectangle opening. Rotate with your needle down. And I do move the zipper pull out of the way as I sew around it. Sometimes you just run out of thread at the worst possible spot, which a zipper overlay is not great for them. All right, and then leave these threads long also. All right, so I'll flip that over and I'm going to pull all of the threads to the back. Okay. So much easier to tie if they're all the same length. Okay. All right, now we're going to fold the top interior zipper pocket down over the bottom, right sides together. Match up the sides, and I'm going to clip those together. Including where the zipper is. All right, and once we have that all matched up, we are going to trim off the bottom of the longer panel. To make it even with the shorter panel. All right, and then we're going to top stitch along the sides only. I'm sorry, not top stitch. We're going to sew together along the sides using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure that you back stitch really well at the bottom because we will be turning the bag right side out. Well, just make sure you back stitch well. We're leaving the bottom open. All right. So next step is making the zipper panels. Well, I guess it's a zipper panel. On the wrong side of all of the zipper panels, we want to measure and mark 1 inch from each short end. Dog hair. I really should get the tags that say may contain dog hair because there's a good chance. Okay. Now we are going to use double-sided tape. I like to use the 1/2 inch. It's not necessary to be 1/2 inch. I mean, you could use 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, whatever. But along each one of these, you can also like line them up and just place one strip of tape. I think that's what Lauren Mormino does. And I have done that, but then I feel like some of the tape kind of sticks out and it annoys me. So it's not my go-to. Oh, also, can I show you something? Can you see my watch when it lights up? That sunflower, I grew that in my yard and I took the picture. Isn't it pretty? Okay. Anyway, I think I'll try. I literally, I have this like kind of a little mound, I guess you would say. Not little. It's not real tall, I think is what my thought was to call it little, but it's probably like 20 feet wide, 20 feet long, I don't know, and 10 feet wide. And it kind of mounds up like probably only 1 to 2 feet higher in the very center than the ground around it. I have no idea like why it's like that. But we tilled it up and I had some various flower seeds and I just kind of threw them all over this mound. So I had zinnias and I had some flowers that grew and it was kind of cool. And I put 0 effort into it, which is my favorite. So I think next year I'll do the same thing. And I just want to have more flower seeds. Okay, so right now what I'm doing is folding the raw edge to the line. So I'm folding 1/2 inch toward the wrong side on each edge, each end. Okay, so now we have this. So we want to place one of these right side up. Take our 14-inch zipper. I'm going to put the zipper pull on. Pull it all the way down to the other end and separate it. And then I'm going to fold the zipper teeth at a 90-degree angle at the top. And with the sides pushed together like this, use a lighter to melt the zipper tape and then push it together. It is a little bit hot, so be careful to not burn yourself. And this is what you have. Repeat that on the other side. Also, if you don't want to use a lighter, you can just sew that portion. You could use glue. I don't know if double-sided tape is like strong enough to hold this down. I did not come up with this idea either. I saw it on Facebook. Somebody else did it. And that's the method I've used since. All right, so now we have that. So now with the zipper right side down, I like to start where the teeth curve to line up with one of those like 1/2 inch marks. And we're just going to clip the zipper in place on the right side of one of the zipper panels. All right, now this you should sew in place using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. With this zipper foot on, I can't get quite to 3/8. It's more like somewhere between 1/4 and 3/8, which is fine for this part. So I don't enjoy switching out my zipper foot if I don't have to, so I'm just going to leave it on. And then I make sure that I stop sewing when I get to the end of the zipper panel. I don't want to sew past that. Those stitches will show. Oh, and you know, really, sew the first line at 1/4 inch. That's what the directions say. And I literally just finished watching The Summer I Turned Pretty. I watched all of it, and I was just going to say it's what Susanna would have wanted. All right, now this you want to sew with the 3/8 inch seam allowance, or as close as you can get to that. All right, now we want to press these zipper panels away from the zipper and bring them wrong sides together. A seam roller can help to make sure it's flattened nicely. I'm just going to clip these together. All right, now we're going to top stitch around this using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, and then we'll repeat that on the other side of the zipper. And I'm going to make sure that my stripes are matched up the same way. All right, so this one, I'm going to sew both zipper panels on at the same time. Which I'm not always sure if that's a good idea, but it's quicker. I am going to unzip the zipper though. All right, same process. Fold these two zipper panels away from the zipper and wrong sides together. All right, and then we'll top stitch around this one using a 1/8 inch seam allowance as well. All right, now we want to find the centers of the zipper panels, which is easiest to do by just folding them in half, and then I'll just place a little snip. Okay, and then we have our zipper tab, which this might be a little bit different than what you're accustomed to. I'm just going to Place a piece of double-sided tape along the wrong side. And place the zipper up into the tab and fold it over. Simple as that. And then we just top stitch along the edge of the zipper tab using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now first we want the lining back. We're going to find the center of that, same way we found the center of the zipper tab or zipper panels. And then we will line that up. Okay, with centers matched. Make sure the zippers are both going the same direction. We will clip that in place. And we're going to baste it on using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, and then I want one of the lining top panels. The stripes should kind of match up-ish. Place that right sides together. Clip them together, and then we're going to sew together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, and then we're going to press the top panel up with the seam allowance facing up and the zipper panel facing down, and top stitch using a 1/8 inch seam allowance through the top panel and the seam allowance. All right, now we'll attach the zipper panel and top panel to the other lining main. So first I'm going to mark the center of this one. All right, centers matched. Okay, so this one, we're just going to do it all at one time. I'm going to go ahead and place the top panel on here right now before I sew the zipper panels in place. And then I'll just go down the clips one by one and clip the lining top in place. So you don't have to do it in 2 steps. I write it into the patterns that way just because you're less likely to mess up if you do it that way. But it's quicker to do it this way. All right, and then same thing here. We're going to press the top panel up away from, or I'm sorry, press the lining top up away from the lining bottom. The zipper panel is pointing down, and we're going to top stitch this using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now we're going to do the same thing that we did with the exterior with the lining, except there are no side panel, or there are no connectors here. So make sure that the seam between the lining top and lining main lines up. And I can go ahead and do both sides at once here because I'm not top stitching this. Okay, so we're going to start sewing this at 3/8 of an inch at the top. For the first inch or so. And then we'll come in and sew at 1/2 an inch until we get to about 1 inch from the bottom. And then we'll return to 3/8 of an inch. So here I'm going to start angling back out to 3/8 of an inch. Repeat that on the other side. Oh no, I don't want to do that. And using a bigger seam allowance here just helps to ensure that it's going to fit inside the exterior nicely, which we shouldn't have much of a problem because there's not like foam or anything in this bag. Angle back out to 3/8 of an inch. All right, and then I'm going to trim this seam allowance down, even though we didn't on the exterior because we top stitched it. We're not top stitching this. All right. So for the lining bottom panel, we're going to place it right sides together, just like we did with the exterior pieces. All right, we're going to top stitch it the same way. So press the bottom panel away from the lining main panels. The seam allowance is under the bottom panel, and then we're going to top stitch that using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then we'll repeat that on the other side. And that's why it's important to come back to that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the bottom, so that the bottom panel still fits properly, so that it still fits. All right, now here, we're going to leave the lining back open, which is the side with the zipper pocket. I'm also going to unzip my interior zipper pocket right now so that I don't forget. Make sure that my top zipper is all the way unzipped. All right, and the lining front is the side with the slip pocket on it. So I'm going to match the bottom edge on that side and clip together. I forgot to mark my center, but I think it lines up well enough that it's not necessary completely. All right, and I'm going to sew this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, and then right now we're going to leave the other side open because we will turn the bag right side out through that and then close this up through the bottom of the lining, pocket lining. So I'm going to trim the one side and just don't do anything with the other side yet. Okay, so we have this currently. We're going to turn the lining right side out. Make sure your interior zipper pocket is unzipped. Make sure that the top zipper obviously has to be unzipped for you to turn it. So, all right, we should have this right now. We want the bag exterior, the side with the zipper pocket, or the side with the zipper is going to go up against the exterior side without the zipper. So the zipper pocket is on the front of the exterior of the bag. So you just want to push that down inside the exterior. And then make sure you flip your D-rings or triangle rings down. And we're just going to match up the side seams first. So I'll clip directly at the side seam and then a couple on either side. All right, and then just clip all the way in between the two sides along the front and back. If you're having a hard time lining this up, you might want to mark the centers along the top panels so that you can make sure that the centers are aligned also. All right, and then we're going to sew this together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All You want to make sure while you're sewing this too that the end of your zipper, your main zipper, is not like poking out and getting caught in the seam allowance. It shouldn't be, but I think sometimes I like the zipper panels to point up, and then I think in those situations you have a little bit more to worry about when you're sewing the lining in. But when the zipper panels face down into the lining, it's really a lot less challenging. All right, so we're going to flip this right side out through the hole in the bottom of the lining. So it should be relatively easy to turn, especially since it's so slouchy. All right, so now we're going to reach into the interior zipper pocket and pull the lining portion of the bag inside out through the pocket. Okay, and this is also why I like to leave my interior zipper pockets pretty big, so you have room to work. Makes the process easier if you have a bigger opening. All right, so I have to work with this a little bit because it's a little bit like squished up. So we just want to pin together, clip together, whatever, along the open edge. All right, and then we're going to sew that together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, now we'll trim that seam allowance down. Tuck it back inside the interior zipper pocket. All right, so now we need to get this top seam in order. All right, and if you've watched me before, you know that I like to top stitch my bags inside out. Because I am sewing on a flatbed sewing machine. It's just easier that way. So I'm just going to work with this a little bit to get the top seam really nicely turned. All right, once you have that all clipped, I'm going to carefully turn this right side out and hopefully not pop all these clips off. All right, so now we're going to top stitch Using a 1/8 inch seam allowance, make sure you switch to a longer stitch length. So stitch length of 5 for me. All right, and I'm going to start right here with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. I always like to start kind of on the side or somewhere that'll be kind of hidden with my back stitching. All right, when you get back to where you started, you'll just want to back stitch right over that same spot again. All right, and then we'll turn everything back right side out. Okay. Now, maybe my new favorite pattern? We'll see. We're going to pull the bottom of the lining panel out, or the bottom of the interior zipper pocket. And I wish we could just like fold it like that. We're going to tuck the raw edges inside. Like 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever. Just make sure it's like even. I make this look much harder than it is. Okay, so if you follow Lauren Mormino, which I'm sure you do, she does her pocket bottoms a little bit differently so that the raw edge is already like folded up. It's much easier than my way. So watch her, use her method. feel like I just really made that a process. So top stitch this closed using just an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we just have to finish the straps. All right, so the exterior, or the bag body, I guess, is all finished. Connectors on the side. Gives a little visual interest to have that rectangle ring there. I really like how this turned out. So for the straps, let's see, have you do the handle first, or whatever, the shoulder strap. All right, so we want to draw a line down the center, which would be 2 inches in. Maybe while I'm at it, I'll just draw the lines down the center of the adjustable crossbody panels too. I do really like webbing for crossbody straps, so that's an option if you don't want to make a strap. You can use webbing. I like the look of it being vinyl, but I like the work of using webbing. You could honestly use webbing for both. Okay. So now with our shoulder strap, take double-sided tape and place it directly down the center over the line that you just marked. All right, and then we're going to fold both long edges into the center line. I'm sorry if my head's in the view, but it's hard to see the line. Okay, and then fold the other side up to meet that. It can fold. It's a little easier to fold it if you leave a slight gap between the two because of the thickness of the vinyl. That way it doesn't like kind of bunch up. All right, and then we'll use one more strip of vinyl or tape. All right, now probably unnecessary, but I like to clip my straps also along like the open side until I sew it to make sure that it stays together. All right, so we're just going to sew down each side using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And you can also, if you want to, for continuity, I guess, sew using a 3/8 inch seam allowance down each side so that it looks the same as the connectors. All right, so the handle, we will take 2 of our swivel clips and we just want to attach them to each end just like this. I will use rivets for that. So I like to use my rivet tool from Jolie Lee Creations to mark the placement for the holes. And I always crack myself up when I say I use the A hole and the C hole. And then punch a hole each of those spots. Okay, sometimes it doesn't cut all the way through on the first try, but I feel like if I rotate it like that, it helps it too. Okay. So if there's one side that you want to be like the right side or the wrong side of your straps, pick that now. Slide my swivel clip on, insert the post through the front, and then out through the back. You want your rivets to be just long enough that they just go through. You don't want like a ton of extra. So if you have super thick vinyl, you may want to use like long post rivets. These rivets, I believe, have a 9mm post. Okay, and then the other side, same process. All right, so we have the shoulder strap done. Now for the crossbody strap. Okay, so first we want to take two ends and place them perpendicular to each other, right sides together. So just like this. So we have two corners here with the length coming down and going to the right. And it's important that it is the right way. And again, if you have a piece of vinyl that is long enough for you to make a crossbody strap out of, you don't need to do this in two separate pieces. Just typically, we may not, and so this is the way I like to do it. All right, so I will take my ruler, and I'm finding the corner of this piece and the corner of the back strap panel, and I'm going to draw a diagonal line. Okay, just like that. All right, now we're going to sew directly along that line. All right, remove the clips. We're going to flip this. So the little parts are wrong sides together and the strap is opened up. And now we're going to top stitch on each side of the seam using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, and then we're going to make sure that this is folded back out of the way and trim off the excess triangle of vinyl from each side. And the reason that we do this on an angle is so that you don't have the bulk of that strap all going through your slider at one time. It helps it to really lay nice and flat. All right, so now we're just going to repeat the same process, just on a much longer scale. So I'm taking my double-sided tape and placing it directly along the marked line all the way down. All right, make sure it's stuck nicely. All right, and then we're going to start at one end and start removing the paper and bring up both of the long raw edges up to that center line. I don't know how well it'll work for me to try to fold both sides at one time, so I think I'm not going to do that. I literally cannot even see where I marked the line on this side. It's there, I know it is. Just kind of wing it. All right, now strip of tape all the way down. This is another reason why it's beneficial. Not another reason. This is a reason why sometimes you should sew your straps first, because right now I don't want to do this. I'm ready to be done. Maybe I should actually write a pattern like that sometime. Probably don't really need clips, but I feel better about it. This vinyl's a little bit fluffy, puffy, which makes sense because it's got the like felt back instead of like the luxe back, but it sews down pretty flat. All right. Just toss it over your shoulder and 1/8 inch seam allowance down both long edges. All right, so I'm going to trim these threads real quick. All right, so for your crossbody strap, if you're using vinyl, you'll want to make sure that you have like a wide mouth slider. This one is from Mormino. So we're going to just wrap that around the center bar. And then I'm just going to sew this part. And I'll use a rivet on the other end. So I just sew close to the hardware, across, back stitch, back across. I'm going to back stitch one more time. And then I'm going to sew a second line. Close to the edge of the strap. Okay, so with this side facing up, stretch out the whole strap nice and flat and put a swivel clip on like this. If you're folding up the strap, it's not twisted at all. And then you'll bring that back through the adjuster and down over the center. And I'm just going to make sure that it adjusts properly. It's a little thick since it's vinyl, but it's fine. So see, with the wide mouth slider, you have a little more room. And then on the other end, we're actually going to use a rivet. So Use my little tool. All right, we're done. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the whole video. I cannot wait to see your bag. We're going to clip on the shoulder strap. If you have a D-ring, it's a little easier to have both straps on at once. So there's the shoulder strap. You can tuck it up nice and tight under your arm. Let's see how I like that. Oh yeah, that's perfect. If you want it longer, obviously, do that. That's why we're making our own bags. And then you can also strap the crossbody on, or clip the crossbody on at the same time. And it does work. You can put both in with the triangle ring, but it is easier with the D-ring. What the heck? I just got the other end in fine. Now I got this one stuck. There we go. All right, so crossbody on, shoulder strap attached, and we have a completed bag. So thank you so much for watching. If you don't already follow me, follow my channel, give the video a thumbs up. Let me know what you think. Bye.